Let's talk about something fascinating. A court decision can be like a snapshot in time. What was considered totally solid, legally sound 1 year can be completely, and I mean completely, wrong just a decade later. Today we're going to dive into a real case that shows exactly how the law can change right under our feet.
So here's the big puzzle we're tackling. Can a court look at a set of facts, reach a conclusion that seems, logical on the surface, and still be legally wrong? As we're about to find out, the answer is a huge and pretty interesting yes.
All right, so our guide for this journey is a case from 2012 out of the Rajasthan High Court, Nishant Hussain versus Seema Saddique. Think of this judgment as a perfect time capsule. It preserves exactly what the law on domestic violence looked like right before everything started to change.
Okay, so let's get the facts straight. Here's the timeline. They get married in '97, but by 2002 they've separated after some alleged harassment. Now fast forward 5 whole years of them living apart. In 2007, a new incident happens, and that triggers a domestic violence petition. While all that is going on, they get officially divorced in 2010. And then 2 years later, in 2012, the High Court just dismisses the petition entirely. The big question, of course, is why?
To really get why the court made that call, we basically have to hop in a legal time machine. We're going to break down the 4 key legal ideas the court was working with back in 2012 that led it to its final decision.
So what was the first big roadblock? It was this idea called the shared household rule. See, back then, the thinking was pretty straightforward. For something to count as domestic violence under the law, the couple had to be, actually living together at that time.
And you can see the court's logic right here, black and white. Because the couple had been living apart for 5 years, the court basically said, well, there was no opportunity, no occasion for domestic violence to even happen. From their point of view, that physical separation was a total deal breaker for the case.
But, and this is a huge but, that interpretation did not last. The Supreme Court later came in and said, whoa, that view is way too narrow. The law is written to protect a woman who is or has been in a domestic relationship. That little phrase, has been, is absolutely crucial. It means a woman's rights are tied to where she has lived in the past. Living separately now? Nope, not an automatic disqualifier anymore.
All right, so hurdle number 2 for the petitioner was the ticking clock. The court took a rule from criminal law and said, look, you have to file a domestic violence petition within 1 year of the incident. Since the main history of problems was way back in 2002, filing something in 2007 was just considered way too late.
Yeah, but then fast forward to 2021, and boom, the Supreme Court, in a case called Kamachi, completely dismantled this entire argument. It explained that the Domestic Violence Act is mostly about getting civil help, things like protection orders. That 1-year time limit, it only kicks in for the crime of breaking one of those orders later on. It has nothing to do with the initial act of just filing the case and asking for help in the first place.
Okay, the court's third point gets a little more into the nitty-gritty of the 2007 incident itself. The court basically argued that, look, even if some threat was made, one single isolated incident after they've been separated for so long, it just didn't really fit the picture of what we think of as ongoing domestic violence. Now, this is where things get a little nuanced, right? The 2012 court was probably correct about the specific facts in front of them. A minor threat probably wasn't enough. The problem is, its reasoning created this misleading general rule. The Supreme Court later cleared this up in Krishna Bhattacharjee, saying that while a pattern isn't always needed, a single grave incident, we're talking something like a serious assault, can absolutely 100% be considered domestic violence all on its own.
And the final nail in the coffin, the decisive blow for this case back in 2012, was the divorce. The court's logic was that once the divorce was finalized in 2010, the woman was no longer legally an aggrieved person under this specific act. Her legal status had changed, and so her rights under this law were gone.
I mean, you can't get much clearer than this. The court believed that the marriage certificate was everything. Once that legal tie was cut, so was the right to use this specific law to get protection for anything that happened during the marriage. It was just a closed door.
But, you guessed it, this idea has also been completely thrown out. The Supreme Court pointed right back to the text of the law itself, which, as we've talked about, protects a woman who is or has been in a domestic relationship. That phrase again, has been, was put there on purpose to make sure that a divorce doesn't just magically erase a woman's right to seek justice for violence she went through during the marriage.
So, look, what we're really seeing here isn't just a few small tweaks to the law. This is a fundamental shift, a huge change, driven by the Supreme Court to read the Domestic Violence Act in a much broader,
more protective way that actually reflects a deeper understanding of the realities of the issue.
And this table really just spells it all out for us. You see, in law, courts follow earlier decisions, which we call precedents. On the left, you've got the older cases the 2012 court was relying on for its arguments. And on the right, you've got the new, game-changing Supreme Court decisions that came along and basically rewrote the rules for each one of those areas.
Okay, so you might be thinking, why are we spending so much time digging up this one old case? Well, it matters a ton, because old judgments like this are still out there. They get cited in courts, and knowing what's still good law versus what's now dangerously wrong is absolutely critical for everyone.
You know, it's interesting. Even in a ruling that's mostly outdated, there are still some timeless legal ideas we can pull out. The courts focus on looking at the total context, on needing specific allegations, and on considering the severity of the incidents. All of that is still good law. Those are things that matter in any case today.
But, and this is the huge but, the four main pillars that the 2012 decision was built on, they are now flat out dangerously incorrect. If you relied on them today, you'd be making a serious legal mistake. So let's be crystal clear. Living apart is not a bar. That one-year time limit for filing a civil case is gone. A single grave incident can be enough, and divorced women absolutely, for sure, have the right to file a claim.
So, if there's one big thing you take away from all this, it should be this. The law isn't some static photograph, just frozen in time. It's much more like a moving film, constantly evolving as our society and how judges interpret things change along with it. A judgment that was perfectly right for its time can become a perfect example of what not to do just a decade later.
And all of this leaves us with one last, kind of mind-blowing question to think about. If the law can change this dramatically in just 10 years, what legal ideas that we all just accept as settled law today might be completely unrecognizable to the courts of tomorrow? What do you think is going to be the next big shift?